Okay. Let's talk about some characters.
Let's talk about characters. Should we give like a little bit of a context before we just go into it?
Yeah. We got characters who represent different archetypes in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which is based on his study of all of the world mythologies, dating back to the earliest stories we can find out of human history. And we pulled characters out of the ecosystem around Connor Prairie, a nice riparian zone around the river. And we chose characters to represent the different archetypes that are in mythological stories.
I think of it too, thinking of somebody stepping into either the artscape later on or this chat, thinking like, what do you mean the archetypes or what characters? And you mentioned stories. And think of like any movie or book that you've ever participated with. So like you step into Aladdin and you've got all these archetypes, which are just like almost like a cupcake mold for a character. So you have like Jafar, who's kind of like, this like
Classic villain
sense. And you've got like the young innocent orphan Aladdin who steps out to go on his little coming of age story. But like
got the love interest in Jasmine. You got the tiger, who is like the love interest protector.
Yeah.
What's the tiger's name?
I don't remember the tiger's name.
Oh no.
Raja.
Yeah, that's right.
Raja.
And then the genie, who's like the mythological friend, guide, helper.
Yeah, like guide into like that magical world.
The magic carpet, who's like a gift from the magicians to help the hero make it through the journey.
Yeah.
All these things show up in all the stories, and for me it was like learning the theory of things is so esoteric sometimes, and then when you recognize that in real life there's all these people playing these roles and they've served very important things for me, like they're things I recognize in my own life.
You see yourself in the characters. And so that as a container for stories to live within and to not try and reinvent the wheel, we have looked at what is classically 12 archetypes that exist within all these stories. And like you said, it's like all the way back from Gilgamesh or the Odyssey all the way to like Friends and Game of Thrones and all of these like modern and contemporary stories all the way back to the oldest ones in written record use these archetypes. You can like juice concentrate, distill them down into 12. But one thing that we did that was different, as you can sort of see as the project grows, there's like this turtle shell. I'm gonna look at camera probably sometimes too to say hi. With a turtle shell, we bumped into a painted turtle shell early in the story, and this is my drawing of a real turtle shell. And in a turtle shell there are 13, there's an official scientific name for these, I'm just going to call them the inner tiles or inner scales of a turtle shell, and there are 13 of them, and then around the sides there are 28. And most of the people indigenous to North America, as well as other places in the world, most places in the world, used this as a moon calendar, because there are 13 moons that happen over the course of a year with roughly 28 days per moon cycle, which if you did the math of 13 times 28, 364. And we decided instead of having 12 archetypes, we were going to have 13 to match the 13 inner tiles of this turtle shell. So when we go through our characters, and you'll see it in the artscape eventually, you'll see it in all the mythology with everything, there are 13 characters that we'll have listed out. Have them listed here. Hot take. And then around the edge, this is like a little bit of a foreshadow of what's to come. When you speak in English or any Latin-based language, Spanish, French, they're typically, with English, there are 26 letters, right? That doesn't count any doubles with accents or anything like that. And there's 28 that go around a turtle shell, so we're going to have an additional tile at the top for an inhale and an exhale at the bottom to make 28. And then we'll have A, B, C, D. We'll make up a fictional language to go around the edge of that. So anyway, our mythology starts with the turtle as the primary creator. Again, this like doesn't reinvent the wheel. So there's like all of these stories of, we're on the turtle's back, Turtle Island.
Also, side note for those of you organizers out there, they do fit nicely into 4 groups of 3 types of beings, which is very fun. So the first 3 are going to be our water characters.
Yeah. I've got, as with organizers, I'm going to reference, we've got a nice little Google spreadsheet of these things too. So we get like kind of dorky, fun, in the weeds with personality types with this too. So we're going to reference a thing called the Enneagram, which is a way to understand the motivations and fears, so to speak, of different characters. And there's 9 Enneagram type numbers that we're going to reference. And then the archetypes and sort of different virtues they have. But we've got a water character area, we've got the birds, we've got plants, we've got sort of like the creatures, which is a little bit of, there's some, the butterflies in that, it could go into the bird category.
It's an insect, but it's an insect. It's a creature.
Yeah, and then we've got other for the mushroom mycelium, but yeah. Keep going.
So the turtle, pulling from many a story, turtles all the way down, a great philosophical aphorism. We got the turtle as the creator. It's kind of like the omnipresence. It's everywhere, it's in all time, but it's also ancient. And it has relationships with kind of all of the areas of creation because it serves as a Rosetta Stone. So it will help us decode the language. It will help us translate the language between beings, and it will kind of be a communication and symbolic device for like the transition between stages of our story.
I'm not going to do this for every character, but I want to start it with this where I'm going to give a little bit of like the creation story thing with it, but it's hyper short. So there's, we're going to have all these little stories and fables that we'll write with it, but the super condensed version where we're starting with the turtle is like we have this idea, we're still writing it, that there's the river that's in existence, but like all of creation doesn't exist yet. Like the universe is void and it's empty and it's nothing. Again, nods to pretty much every creation story from different world traditions. And in our story, the way that we have it written is there is the river, and the depths go down into the darkness, into the mud murk. And there's this sturgeon, this fossil of a fish that's been around for hundreds of millions of years in the same form generally, and it is this guide from this place that is beyond time. So it's not past, present, future. It's beyond time. It's all time. And the sturgeon guides this turtle, this mother character, this sort of our nod to Makungus, William Connor's first wife, and guides the turtle up from the depths, from the mud murk, through this river to where the land and the water meet. And the turtle comes out of the water, the sturgeon, Sturu of the mud murk.
Sturu of the mud murk.
Sturu of the mud murk.
Our best character name so far.
Descends back down into the depths. The turtle rises out, finds this desolate winter landscape of nothingness, and goes, and on the turtle's back is obviously home, but like in that form, there is sort of a recipe for all of the archetypes of the characters to come, as well as the language. He said Rosetta Stone, that classic tablet that they found that helps you translate between, these 3 classical languages.
Cuneiform.
So ours will have like the English, and then our, like, we're calling it like the cosmic language or the elemental language, and a water language. Fictional languages we're making up for the project. So you can translate it. So the turtle has that Rosetta Stone on its back. And it climbs out and it goes and it metaphorically plants this mythology, this story, time itself, the ability to have a past, present, and future in the ground at the river bend. We're placing this at Connor Prairie, and from that seed, so to speak, comes the first sycamore tree, and then all of creation and all of the characters unfold out of that.
Yeah.
So the turtle is like, it's the spark that sets the whole animated world on fire. So the turtle is the beginning.
Turtle. Then we have Sturu of Mudmurk.
Sturgeon.
Our sturgeon. And truly, a sturgeon is a multi-100-million-year-old being. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's just this representer of sort of the almost reptilian force that pulls creation out from the abyss.
Yeah. And in a very Joseph Campbell global mythology study, oftentimes there is this reptile, fish, watery, slithery creature that brings your
dragon, snake.
Yeah. Your creator from beyond time into the physical world. Something happened? Low battery?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
So we don't need to go to the references, but like there's a lot of mythologies from Egypt to South America that have like, or even think of Aesop's fables, like a frog a lot of times is sort of the invitee for one world to the next. So
the turtle also fits into that.
Oh yeah.
And then we have
the word associations, just a couple of them. Like the sturgeon is sort of like is the keeper of the past. They are the keeper of the past. Think there's sort of like this wizardy vibe to the sturgeon. It's like dark, mysterious, mud murk. They're kind of unseen. There's this ancient wisdom to them.
The patron saint of thresholds, which is a cool one, like the threshold between reality and more than reality.
Yeah. And on that archetype wheel, there are different. I'm trying to find it quickly in my notebook. There are different words that pair with different archetype numbers. So there's like the caretaker, and the sturgeon is the caretaker. So while they come from this like cold, dark, mysterious place, there's like this warmth to them.
Is that the 2?
It's the 2. Yeah. So Enneagram, they're the 2. They're looking to help. They're looking to
so
take care
it does have this really nice juxtaposition between being kind of this formidable, scary, godlike creature, but also being a 2 on the Enneagram, which is the helper, the caretaker. And so it does also sort of carry this maternal presence with it, and like a kind of kindness despite its first impression.
Yeah. Let's keep going with it. So we go turtle, sturgeon, and we go to the mussel. With again, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's relationships. So
the first time we went down to the White River, both of us were just pretty taken with the sea of hundreds and thousands, probably millions, of freshwater mussel shells.
These little mussel shells, these little clam shells
on the riverbed.
Everything that we're going to list out are flora and fauna and other things that we saw at the river on our playful research trips, both at the river with the preschoolers, with bird watching.
Yeah. So our mussel is our kind of librarian, the keeper of the story. We thought it would be a really cool little symbol to use all of these shells as sort of the record of this land and of this people and all of the people who've called this place home, like a true witness to everything that has happened for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
So for the sake of the metaphor, the simile, picture this line of stories like mussel shells, stories like clam shells, like just infinite along the shore.
Prolific, yet so mundane.
Yeah. And they're just in plain sight. Mm-hmm. And there's this idea of different characters keep things safe, so to speak. They're caretakers, they're keepers of, and the mussels are the keepers of, the caretakers of the poetry of the story. Yeah. There's like sort of this librarian, scribe, scroll energy to them.
Well, and true to their form, they last forever. Like shells don't disintegrate. They don't, like you can, one of the best records of where Native Americans have been are where the oyster shell piles are.
The middens.
So the middens, the shells are like building blocks because they never disappear, and it's the residue of the story's past.
Actually, maybe we'll call, instead of calling it the library, we'll call it the midden.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. There is this quiet, understated quality to them too. We think of the relationship between the turtle comes with the story, comes with the mythology on its back, gives that to the place, gives it to the sycamore. The sycamore is grounded, rooted, this observational monk character in the cathedral of the forest, this monastery of the forest, grows this story and thinks, again, this is the story in the works, where can I place this story to keep it safe? Let me place it in these thousands and millions of shells all along the river in plain sight, kind of a la, let me keep my keepsake, my most important thing on the mantle in plain sight.
Yeah.
And
the world's toughest Horcrux.
Yeah. And going through it, that they are this micro and macro. You have this massive, clearly sacred sycamore tree, particularly on the bend at Conner Prairie below treetop. But then you have these oyster and freshwater clam shells that you just pass over. You don't see it as sacred. They're so average. They're so unflashy, yet they are the keepers of that story. And when you open it up, there's this like mother of pearl sheen to them. Like if you're willing to look close, there's this beauty that lies within them. Cool. Let's go to the bird category now.
Okay, a very different character, the eagle, our hero,
it's the apex
character
predator,
of the future, the apex predator.
Yeah.
In Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer has this bit when she's talking about Lake Onondaga, where she says the apex predators don't make a healthy ecosystem. The apex predators reap the rewards of a healthy ecosystem. They're not the cause of health, but an indicator of health, and they co-opt the health of an ecosystem, take the excess.
Yeah, and oftentimes that apex predator is the first member of the ecosystem to leave when the ecosystem isn't healthy anymore. Yeah. So plants, grasses, weeds, the microbiomes start to bring the health back to a place. It starts mushrooms transforming all that, and then once it's healthy enough, and it can sustain apex predators. They're the keeper of the future. Imagine, bird's eye view, the eagle eye, seeing the horizon. When we do the film, it's going to be very drone shot, big picture.
Bird's eye view.
There's a strong connection to William Conner in that, as like there's this capturing of resources. Like again, William Conner showed up, found a place that was resource full,
resource rich,
and prospered from this place that had all like these generations of lives before it in this place, sort of primed and ready for him to, take it as you will, like to take advantage of that place. Like there's
if you want to read between the lines, one of our first trips down to the river, we happened upon this pile of trash.
Eagle trash.
Eagle trash. It was like catfish skeletons and spines of different small animals. We found a couple skulls of some rodent type creatures, corn cobs that had been all eaten. And our friend Michelle told us that there was an eagle nest up in that tree, and we looked up and saw it, and this was like the bone pile. And so we kind of have this image of the eagle as a hoarder, of a user of resources, of turning life into objects to be consumed.
Yeah, and it just from like a journalistic standpoint of like, well, what do you do with the character that is the apex predator, that like has this big picture, that steps into the room as an Enneagram 8, so to speak, like 8 as like this sort of asserter of their powerful self. And then there's this collection. So the museum has a collection, and we're trying to figure out, like, just from an institutional standpoint, like, how is that resource of the collection best offered to the community? How do they have access to it? How do they gain learning from it? How do you understand the past and present and future through this collection of objects?
Let's do Great Blue Heron.
Yeah.
Which is a super fun character.
Yeah.
A very important character in the artwork so far.
Yeah.
In the last few projects.
So there's this relational quality to the artwork that we're making, and like a relationship in real life with a person or a pet, you gain insight and wisdom the more you spend time with them, right? So the Great Blue Heron has been this ongoing central character in like our cosmology, our mythology, and the art projects for literally years now. And there's all this this really nice, robust vibe that we get. And as we were talking about these, a Great Blue Heron literally landed within sight of where we were when we were making these lists. So in our archetype list, the Great Blue Heron is the artist. They are the keeper of the present. Imagine, like, I'm gonna become one.
Okay.
Great Blue Heron, like with their curved neck, I can't do it, but like they just stand perfectly still, like the internet guy that does that, waiting for the fish to come, like, and the embodiment of patience, the embodiment of presence and soul focus.
Yeah.
On the task at hand.
In our story, a little note on that is they have this partnership with the mushroom, where the mushroom is the inhale, taking in the death. Taking in what has been, and the Great Blue Heron is the animator, the exhale, the thing that pulls it out and brings it back to life.
Which just another thread to many different world mythologies, this breathing the world into life, like the creator, God, spirit, universe, mystery, whatever your tradition calls it, breathing that life into the dust of a thing to bring the world to life, and that the world is created and recreated with every breath that occurs. And so you'll see this artist character breathing life into stone, breathing life into wood, and in connection with that mushroom, the inhale and the exhale, the transformation of things that are thought to be dead forever. Like that is seasons. That is the life cycle of an ecosystem, to take last year's leaves and turn it back into the soil for the upcoming year's root growth.
I don't know. You might be able to tell we're a little biased, but to be the artist, to be the creator, is an incredibly powerful position to be in. It's a bit formidable, but it's also like this highly honored position in the ecosystem. And so the great blue heron kind of has that intimidating presence. It's much taller than other things. Its weight, its size,
it's formidable.
A pretty, is a pretty incredible predator. It's a pretty scary thing to look at up close. They make kind of a gnarly sound, and yet they're so beautiful, and they carry with them this presence of renewal and creation. Yeah.
We also talked about the qualities that just are observable with this great blue heron, that they kind of have this old soul quality to them. There is this wisdom. There is this sense of like, you've seen some stuff. Mm-hmm. You've experienced some things, and you are present with it. And we found this, I'm going to grab something off the shelf over here. This chunk of some kind of funny little old sculpture when we were on a canoe trip along the river, and we found this lodged in the muddy bank. At first we called it Julius Caesar, but upon digging into the look, particularly the haircut, we're pretty sure that this is the bust of St. Francis of Assisi sculpture, and St. Francis was like to say it in other words, like the patron saint of animals, and was also an artist, wrote songs, did composition, wrote poetry, saw the world as this living, breathing creation.
One of my favorite St. Francis isms is that he says that creation itself is the first iteration of God.
That's nice.
That the world, the animals, the rivers, the ecosystems tell us all we've ever needed to know. They carry the whole character of God, which I really love that as a theology. Yeah.
And there's lots more that we could say about the great blue heron, but it's for me one of the characters that I connect most thoroughly with. I'm really excited to dig into it. But
all right, next we have the goldfinch,
and to give like a little snapshot, to like hand you like a little Polaroid memory for the goldfinches. We went down with the education department to go bird watching. And we got down to the river after walking down through the property, and there was like this whole, I wish I knew the collective name for goldfinches right now. I'll just call it flock, because I don't know what it is. A sparkle of goldfinches. There was a whole sparkle of goldfinches along the riverbank where all those mussels are, just bathing, drinking, I'm sure finding some seeds. Mm-hmm. But it was like, oh, like what a beautiful Mary Oliver-esque poem we just walked into. That they're just down here doing their daily bath, and we sort of thought, what if we take this really, again, it's just a very common bird, but upon closer inspection it feels like there's sort of the sacredness to them. What if we, from a story standpoint, have them be the messenger between sort of this workaday world and the sun? Kind of an Icarus character, sort of. There's this thread where they carry messages back and forth to the sun and sunlight as this creator of everything that's here that powers the earth. I like this phrase, to have a solar-powered soul, that they're able to capture the life and the joy of sunlight and bring it back down. They played the jester, the wise fool.
Yeah, they're one of our higher paced characters, so they'll have a bit of a musical quality to them. Much like a jester, they will be skilled in music. They will represent some of Indianapolis's jazz history. They'll help score the film.
As we're saying all this too, I want you, if there's anybody out there that's listening to this chat, this is going to be for the installation, like the playscape, which includes this multi-screen, feature-ish film where there's going to be all of these archetypes portrayed in film and video through music in this like immersive theater in the round that we're designing and building from scratch. So you'll see these characters acted out, particularly the goldfinches, probably as jazz musicians wearing like gold and black suits. Like it's gonna be super slick and really fun. And when you picture birds, if you've ever seen a little sparkle of birds, there's sort of like this lilty like as they flap their wings in the pattern of how they fly. And you can imagine if you were listening to music where it's like doodly-doo, doodly-doo, like there's gonna be this musicality that feels like dance, that feels like illustration, that feels like waves that will come with them.
Yeah.
And that's just an innate quality of kind of who they are as goldfinches already. That character of the wise fool from the archetype too. Imagine, the court jester. There's this ancient poet from Persia, Rumi, who kind of has this wise fool character to it too, where there's this deep innate wisdom, but then you almost imagine you're like really wise, like aunt or uncle too, right? Where they've like, again, lived some life, but they can get on the floor and kind of joke around, and they don't take themselves too seriously.
They're also the people, because of that, who can speak truth to power.
Yeah, again, court jester.
Yeah.
That's
the only one who can
saying.
make fun of the king.
The court jester is the only one who can like poke the king.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is why they can be the messenger to the sun, who otherwise would just melt you.
Yeah. Sorry for flicking your nose.
That's okay. All right, let's talk about some plants.
Get into the plants. Let's do
Sweetgrass?
Sweetgrass first, yeah. Start it.
Ooh, sweetgrass. So, a big part of giving the right weight to our big characters is having these characters that you would otherwise pass by and not acknowledge their importance in an ecosystem. Sweetgrass becomes one of these characters. Sweetgrass, as a representative, as a stand-in, it's fine. As a stand-in for all of the grasses that take place in an ecosystem, which restore the ground, which deal with nutrients, which transfer things between different life forms, which hold seeds, which gather seeds off passing animals. It's this indicator of an ecosystem that works for itself, that sustains itself. And sweetgrass has this long tradition, especially on this land here in America.
And shout out Robin Wall
Kimmer as being this indicator of reciprocity, a generous gift of this sweet scented welcome.
Which it's not supposed to be exchanged with money. It's supposed to be a gift. Money's not supposed to be exchanged when it's a giving and receiving of sweetgrass.
Yeah. So sweetgrass is our indicator of reciprocity. It is an indicator of medicine for the soul. It's invitation and welcome. It restores, as grass does, it restores hard earth, brings nutrients out of the air and sky and into the ground.
It's regrown out of this struggle too, like sweetgrass, as with a lot of grasses, flourishes and actually does better if it is trimmed and cut and in partnership. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's grown up side by side in North America with people cutting it, and it grows back. Like, maybe more familiar with the idea of willows. I was more familiar with willows than sweetgrass, but like you cut off like a big clump of willows. So you cut off 20 branches from a willow along the river. It might grow back 40 branches. Like, it flourishes when it is trimmed. Mm. And sweetgrass, if it's trimmed or burned, will flourish. It grows back in multiplicity. So it's this idea of like through that struggle, through that trimming back, comes new growth.
And then visually, it just dances. It moves beautifully. It has these ripples, and if you ever looked out at a field of grass in the wind, it looks like it's moving in coordination with itself. And so it will be one of our characters represented by dancers. Yeah. And it just has a joy to it.
Yeah. And you as in anybody over there, have picked up on the the different scales and weights that we're playing with too. So you have something like the sycamore, and then you have the sweetgrass. Like it was so challenging to decide like which 13 flora or fauna or other things that we did. Like we had lists.
Ecosystem of hundreds of animals and plants.
It was like, let's have a tree for every letter of the alphabet and a water thing for every letter of the alphabet. So to narrow it down was really challenging. So we try and have these different moments of representation for big and small and apex and bottom of the food chain and everywhere in between with it, because they give you different feelings. They embody different qualities. Next on the list,
corn.
Oh, I want to say one more thing about sweetgrass. This was actually one of my favorite parts of it from our chat yesterday. To me, sweetgrass is an embodiment of ecosystems thinking, which is like kind of a mouthful. But ecosystems thinking, by the way that we think of it, is this this knowledge that, to put it in kind of a John Muir way, like to tug on one thing in the ecosystem is to tug on all of it. Everything is connected to everything else. What's upstream affects downstream. What's in the root system goes to everyone. And so our ecosystems thinking is that you are part of a household. The root words of it is oikos, It's a home. So an ecosystem is the order of the home that we all share. And how are we to live together in this home? How are you to be a good member of this household that we're sharing? And they are that mother character of how to be a part of this home that we all share. If you need advice, if you need good counsel about how to live within an ecosystem, you go first and foremost to the sweetgrass, and they will give you good counsel.
Great. On the other hand, corn. Not a great friend to the ecosystem. The decimator of American prairies nationwide.
They are
the hoarder of nutrients, the disposer, the creator of the dead spot. In the Gulf of Mexico.
It's a funny thing. Our look at corn, you can see some of our bias, but at the same time, like, we're part of all the same systems, for better or for worse with this. So corn, from a Aesop's fable standpoint, is going to be a cautionary tale of what you do with your abundance, because corn has provided fuel and food and fodder to fuel our American system.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, we've eaten nothing more than corn.
Yeah.
We've eaten more corn than anything else.
And the things that we eat has eaten nothing more than corn. It's like...
And a part of why we're healthier and taller and stronger as humans now is because of corn. And so it is this double-sided thing.
Yeah.
It's
a super ingredient for pretty much everything on a grocery store shelf.
It's the explorer in our story, which there's been multiple explorers that have passed through these lands. Indiana was the first part of the first Wild West. And so you have these different versions of people exploring through. And one of the stories we liked out of a Wendell Berry essay was about the contrast between the pioneers that came cutting roads and chopping trees versus the Native Americans or the animals that would pass through on these tight little paths, make a small fire, where the explorers who considered it their land to consume, their worth to absorb, would make these huge fire pyres and keep an entire football field warm with these massive loads. And there just wasn't attention paid to what was following them. There wasn't. It's this idea of monocropping a piece of land rather than helping the dirt, helping the soil by rotating your crops through.
Yeah. It's like a one-note thing. Like, you walk through a cornfield and you can literally and metaphorically get lost with that. So that, as a metaphor for our characters, there's going to be sort of this nod to trying to keep your course set, to your intuition, towards your goal, towards your motivation. And if you end up in the cornfield, it's easy to get lost in the cornfield. It's easy to get lost in the abundance that is America. It's in the history of the United States. It is opportunity, and opportunity in our opinion, is embodied no better than any crop than in corn. And so what do you do when faced with the opportunity of hoarding a resource? What do you do with the opportunity, if you were to ask, again, Sweetgrass, how you share that? With the roots of a sycamore, they're dispersing the resources. So to me, it's a challenge to look at history through this lens of what do we want our future to be when it comes to the resources that are all on the table right now. Do we want to hoard that? Do we want to make a monocrop out of that? Do we want to find ways to live with reciprocity? Again, how are we to be members of a household we all share? And corn is
like sugar. You're not going to get rid of sugar. Sugar's the best. It makes food taste good. But cotton candy for breakfast might not be the best plan for your day. And in the same way, moving on to the next character, the sycamore, the broad majority of the old growth sycamore that was cut down for corn.
Yeah, and even sections of these large trunks. Imagine taking like a huge trunk of a tree and you cut through, and then you cut another line through, and you have this huge donut. You would have essentially this giant donut, this giant calamari ring, and they would use that as like sort of the OG grain storage prior to having storage silos, and they would put a cap on that and store grain in there. So
you
literally
meant original grain storage.
OG, original grain. And when you're at Conner Prairie and you're at Treetop and you look down onto this big bend on the river, there are a collection of these sycamores that, while they're not all old growth, they are old and they are clearly special. I don't know what your worldview is, but like for me, when I step down there, I feel like, wow, this feels sacred. This feels special.
You go through, I'll set the stage a little bit. You go through, especially in the spring and summer, it's like knee, chest, shoulder high, brush, bush, everywhere. Green, hot, muggy. And then you get to the sycamore grove, and these trees, which are 5 feet around, shoot up 80, 100, 120 feet in the sky, and it's just sparse between them. And it feels like you've walked into a tall, old Gothic sanctuary.
Yeah. And this, again, like a Robin Wall Kimmerer idea that a lot of times when you talk about the qualities of a plant, people say like, oh, that's anthropomorphism. But she sort of asks, well, like what qualities already existed within these plants before we started to put these things on them as humans? And to me, the trees have always had this sense of like they're there, like almost like bowing down to the river. They all lean towards the river, and they have this quality, both poetically and scientifically, that they show up at the river. They are an indicator of water. So if you have a sycamore on your property, or you see when you're out on a walk, there's probably water nearby. Willows also sort of do this as well, and they're just sort of populated along the river. And there is this sense that we put into the story of it as if they're just out there, as a tree does, just in one spot, and that tree just commits to that spot and is grounded, is rooted, again, in a Wendell Berry sort of way. It doesn't go searching for friends. It's satisfied with the company that arrives.
Mm-hmm. And the sycamore is our sage character.
Yep.
They remember the old growth, and as trees are somehow magically, naturally connected underground through mycelium, through their root systems, they share resources, they share wealth, they also share stories. They share the knowledge of a place over the long term. And so the sycamores have this connection back to their old growth ancestors. And they hold on to the stories, and they speak an ancient language that only those who are patient enough to learn will ever hear.
Mm-hmm. Again, threading it back to other stories that have been told, one of my favorite books that has a river in the middle of it is a book called Siddhartha, which is a modern retelling of the coming of age story of the Buddha as told by Hermann Hesse. And in that book, there is this sense that the river has things to say, that you will be offered insights and gifts of wisdom and peace if you just place yourself on the bank of the river and witness and listen to the river. And so our sort of like sage monk, like rivers and poets, old style Chinese poet, Cold Mountain, is just there to observe the place and witness it, and knows this language that the river speaks, that oftentimes people that are too fast moving or in too much of a stressful state of mind can hear. You have to get really quiet to hear the language of the river. You have to be calm. Also, again, in a Mary Oliver sort of way, that the river is just out there doing its quiet work, whether we as human beings are there to witness it and appreciate it or not. But the tree's just always out there. Rain, it's the post office. Rain or shine, the tree's there with the river. And they, as somebody who is roughly 6 feet tall, to stand next to this tree and to feel small is an important feeling to feel as a human being. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to build like this little meditation breath cabin hut, tiny house, down in this little grove of the sycamores on that bend in the river later on this year, so that people can go down there and experience it and have a relationship with these sycamores. Because to me, this collection of sycamores, this grove, is, I'm going to say, my favorite place on the acreage of Conner Prairie. If I could spend my time nowhere else, I would spend it there. It's really, really special.
Let's talk about some creatures.
Yeah.
What do you want to start with?
Let's start with, let's go to the deer. Let's just start with that.
Our everyman.
Yeah.
Every person.
The every person.
The deer is a 6 on the Enneagram, the loyalist. They're a bit timid.
Sort of raise the flag of like the cautions that should be taken when you step out onto this hero's journey, onto this adventure. Like, what should we be careful of, and what should we put in our backpack to be prepared for?
Yeah. But like a loyalist, it's out of love for their team. It's out of love for their home. So they're the first, the majority supporter, the first person to speak up and say, no, this is us. This is who we are. And so often deer across this continent are just kind of acknowledged without much ceremony as a part of our yard, as a part of our street. Yeah. They're in the roads, they're in the neighborhoods, they're in the wilderness, they're on the mountains. And oftentimes you'll be sitting looking out at a vista and not even realize until it moves that a deer's just been present the whole time. So they also kind of hold this paradox between sacred and mundane in a fun way.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to that Wendell Berry essay as well, from that idea that the early Kentuckians, these European settlers that were coming through, are like cutting whole huge roadways, burning massive piles of wood to keep warm, where the Native Americans, the indigenous folks and animals, had made do for thousands of years, for however many generations, with footpaths and with deer trails. And to me, the trails of a deer are just as synonymous as the animal. Like their spirit is imbued in that trail. And where I live here, I live in about 3 hours north of New York City. When it snows and I go out what I think is an early rise, and I'll go out, I have a baby, so it's still pretty early, but I'll get out there and there's already deer hoof prints, trails that have been made through the snow, because they're up early, they're doing their thing. There's sort of like this rhythm and this pattern that they follow. There's kind of a workaday world. You just got to get up early and go do the work.
Blue collar presence.
Yeah, they're up early, they're out late.
And I think a fun overlay for it is just this kind of spirit of efficiency and resiliency.
Yeah. Like
the deer trail was probably the fastest way to get from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And like they're a large creature. For them to do as little damage and to eat what they eat is just kind of this portrait of resiliency and efficiency and nature that I think says something about the human spirit as well. Yeah.
And yeah, that's that sense of compare and contrast too. Like that idea of the diptych is something that we're gonna play around with, again, literally and figuratively. So from this standpoint, that Indiana is many things, as is every state in the U.S., but we're gonna look like at the ecosystem that is on the Conner Prairie grounds is not very far from really big, wide, major roadways. Mm-hmm. And you have like these big open wetland areas that are right next to cornfields, that are right next to parking lots, and just comparing and contrasting these things through visual side-by-sides is something to explore. And the deer sort of is the tipping point and the invitation for those comparisons.
And this is a great time, talking about borders, to transition over to the coyote,
yeah.
which is the ultimate character of the fringe.
Mm-hmm.
The coyote, the harder humans have tried to kill coyotes in our short human history, the more coyotes there have been. We've killed no animal more than we've killed a coyote in America. Upwards of 500,000 a year. And there are more coyotes now than there have ever been, and that's been the case the whole time. The coyotes have this crazy symbiosis with people where they've infiltrated every major city in the U.S. They've infiltrated every single state except for Hawaii. They're across Canada. They're across Southern America. Deserts, mountains, frigid, hot, doesn't matter. Jungles, swamps, they're everywhere because they find a way.
Yeah, super adaptable.
Incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, really clever, really lean in their wayfinding and waymaking through an environment. They can exist in a pack, or they can be
single,
going solo.
Super resourceful. Like the crossover for us is it's the outlaw, but kind of the romantic outlaw. We're gonna kind of frame it in this troubadour, Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen way. The coyote's gonna help compose the score for the film, but they also, for Conner Prairie's land, it kind of represent a French fur trader a little bit, like this person who's just out of their element, but never can really be out of their element at the same time. Like they travel with their tools, anything they need to fix their boat, to fix their coat, to fix their shoes, to repair their gun. Like anything that needs to happen, a coyote can make it happen because of their resourcefulness and because they don't rely on anything besides himself, which has its ups and downs.
Yeah.
They also scare people. They're not very trustworthy. They're the kind of character who you have to turn to when all else has failed.
Yeah. And knowing that we don't make our artwork in a vacuum too, that these archetypes are references to all of the other archetypes. Our stories, for intentionally and unintentionally, are connected to all their stories that have been written. By no surprise, every other group that has been making stories for thousands of years of human history has had coyotes in them. The Lenape tribe has their different clans, and there is a coyote clan. They are oftentimes part of the origin of a creation in different cultures' creation stories. You mentioned this the other day. I want you to say like how human beings see their own qualities of being these shapeshifters, tricksters.
Yeah, like clever. A lot of people who've looked into the people that were here before Europeans got here have noted that humans have seen their spirit reflected back at them by the coyote. There's a coyote deity in almost every single people group in the Americas, regardless of South America or North America or snow or jungle or desert. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So there's also this sense of they have a really strong ability to like take the information that they have gathered in their liminal searches, because they're going out into these fringe spaces, observing, bringing those back, sharing those little tidbits. And so there's this guide quality. There's sort of this Cheshire Cat quality.
Yeah, they're a bit improvisational just because they can make a way.
Yeah.
They're very creative little creatures.
Yeah.
They were the smallest canids, the smallest dogs to survive this long. Yeah. There were many species of massive canid in the same time that coyotes have been alive in the past few million years. And those have all died off except for the gray wolf and the red wolf.
And I think when you, again, imagining like watching the film, when you see the coyote, it's almost like the foreshadow of what's to come. When you when you look in the coyote's eyes, you know that they know something you don't. Like there's something coming that they know about around the bend, over the horizon, in the treetop that you haven't quite figured out yet. But they already have it somehow.
And their playfulness, their mischievousness is almost a comfort, because you're like, well, they know what's coming, so it can't be that bad.
Yep. The last creature before we get to our final category of other, the butterfly.
Butterfly.
And the butterfly is that embodiment of childhood, of the things that you think of with the beautiful innocence that comes with childhood. Referring back to other stories, think of Sam in the Shire, like unharmed by the world. Like there's this like beautiful vulnerability, and
wide eyes, colors, like no direct paths anywhere.
Yeah.
To me, they represent sort of the purity of pleasure.
Yeah.
Like what does it mean to live a life that feels good?
Yeah.
To live a life that is enjoyable.
Yeah. And you've got Dorothy, Wizard of Oz, goes out, meets this motley crew, goes, faces the wizard behind the curtain, the tornado. Like they're leaving, but there's this like really beautiful softness, vibrancy that they have. And for us, that to sort of tap into that, like the purity of the joy that they take in the world that's around them, is something that we consider to be important as we're making artwork and experiences for children and families, primarily children first and then the adults they come with. We're trying to be able to offer an opportunity for children to live out their childhoods in a rich way, to find that connection with the things that they feel and hear as connected to the world out there, and knowing that every adult that shows up with them was once a child too, that has the birthright for joy and curiosity, and you don't have to get rid of those things because
the butterfly is the representation of not having to work to love home.
Yeah.
To just natively, inherently be at home and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's sort of this high pace to them. There's this, while simultaneously there's kind of this slow motion vibe to them. Very seasonal. I mean, butterfly, not all of them. Many butterflies migrate.
Twilight.
And this idea that when butterflies show up in the springtime, like it is a high note of arrival of spring, and then they stay on through summer, and then they'll migrate in the fall along with a lot of other birds, and you're not going to see a whole lot of butterflies in the wintertime around Conner Prairie. So there's this this tuning in to the seasons that they have as well, which I really like. Last but not least, we have this as our 13th character. Again, 12 traditional archetypes, but our turtle shell 13th, we thought we needed something that sort of like spins this whole thing around and brings it back as renewal. It's our recycler. It's our transformation.
Resurrector.
Yep.
The mushroom.
The mushroom.
Which truly is not a plant, is not an animal, is not a bird.
It's its own category.
It's its own thing.
Which science is kind of on the edge of even trying to figure out what they are and how they work. Hidden Life of Trees kind of was the first book that I read where it talked about the mycelium network, the wood wide web, the sharing of resources, like this internet of the woods, so to speak, where there's this communication that happens between this thing that is other as it connects all these different trees, not even the same types of trees, but every tree within a forest with the other nutrients, and they take those old leaves or those dead animals or the exoskeletons of insects, whatever the resource that we as humans see as something dead, they see as anthropomorphism to the max. They see as opportunity to make into something new. That is how soil is made. They partner with microbes.
And for me, this is the power of ecosystems thinking. I'm mortal. I'm going to live and I'm going to die, and I'm not going to see my own resurrection. But in the ecosystem, death is constantly being folded into life. Every single winter cycle, every single spring cycle, there's just this cascading of death becoming life. And the mushroom is that key. If the fungi takes the refuse, takes the waste, and turns it back into usable building blocks for the ecosystem to survive. Yeah. And so as a human sitting here, where death seems permanent, death seems like a final thing, to look into this metaphor this mushroom, to see it just spin that on its head and turn it upside down is a very powerful critique of my own worldview.
Yeah. And like the rest of our storytelling, we take things that are in existence in this real ecosystem where Connor Prairie happens to be, and we see what stories feel like they come out of it, and we think, okay, again, we're trying to figure out what we do with our current existence, with the baggage and beauty of our history, and what do we do with that? How do we make that new?
Yeah.
And mushrooms, mycelia, I've read it through the work of Paul Stamens, mycologist, and he has this little study where he put it on a bunch of petroleum products, put oyster mushrooms on petroleum products, and they were able to break it down faster than anything else that the other scientific world members could come up with. And so they take the detritus, our waste, our byproducts, and they can actually recycle that and make that new. So then you connect that to, again,
not just the natural byproducts, but the most malicious byproducts.
Yeah.
Styrofoam, petroleum products, oil spills, invasive species.
Yeah. So like, what do you do with that metaphor? Like, think of all of like the metaphorical waste that we have. The things I'm going to put it really simply.
This is where you can start seeing our story come to life.
Yeah. What do you do with all of the things that have gone wrong or feel hard or feel like the stuff that you don't want in your life? What do you do with that?
Yeah.
And this metaphor of composting, of taking all of that hard stuff, your life's struggle, again, like cue every world mythology and world religion ever. Like, what do you do with death? What do you do with sin? What do you do with struggle? What do you do with suffering? Like, how do you reach heaven? How do you reach nirvana? How do you...
The mushroom gives us the alternative path forward. It's not wishing for an undoing, but it could never exist without it.
Yeah. It doesn't compost thin air. Like, it has to take the exoskeletons, the death. It has to take that in order to make the new soil.
Yeah.
The new requires the old. The joy requires the suffering. Like, it is paradox.
It's black humor.
Binary come
it's
together.
Kurt Vonnegut. It's macabre. It's why we love a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. So again, that relationship between the mushroom and the artist, that creation and recreation, the inhale, the exhale, which is a nod to our own human breathing, our own cycles that we go through literally with every breath. And we're not going to, spill all our tea with what we're planning for the film, but our two characters will have this dance of mystery and creation that happens above ground and in a subterranean way, and then those above and below ideas will show up in the art installation. And it's something that really circles back on itself. There's this play of light, this sleight of hand that happens with the mushroom as well. Like, again, we put it in language that we know, like the patron saint of transformation and the necessity of change and growth out of decay. So it's a really striking character, always a new surprise. Again, Robin Wall Kimmerer has this moment in Braiding Sweetgrass where she uses the word popoi. Probably pronouncing it incorrectly. My apologies. But it's out of the Anishinaabe language, and it is the spirit, and again, paraphrase definition, the ability and spirit and rising and growing of a mushroom overnight. You walk by a trail Thursday evening, a decomposing log, and then there's nothing there. You come back Friday morning and there's a mushroom there. There's this like spirit of animacy that rises up. And for us, it's intentional that this is like the last of the 13, because from there it clicks back over and it starts the whole thing over again. It is the world made new. You got to go through the whole cycle and then click, then it starts all over again. It's high noon, high midnight, and then the clock starts again. It's solstice. It is like descending and ascending. And again, on that hero's journey path, through the work of this author, Bill Plotkin, he shows this descent where you start on one side of a canyon, of a river canyon. You start on the edge of that, and you have to descend all the way down to the bottom of the river. Take note of what the river is offering you. Get that wisdom, that vision quest, so to speak. And then you have to turn, and you have to climb up the other side of the canyon wall and get back up on top. And now you're on the other side looking at where you came from. And now you're in that moment of integration. So that inhale that happens at the top, at the bottom, up here, and then you go forth from there. So that's these solstice moments, these big chapter changes. And the mushroom is at like the corner of every page of a chapter turning.
It's the tap of poem.
I think that's
it. Leave
it at that, yeah.
Thanks for listening to our characters.
Yeah, lots more to come. We'll have other little resources with archetypes and Enneagram things to come as the website unfolds, but super fun.
Shoot us an email with some questions. Wes at livethecuriouslife.com or Ryan at livethecuriouslife.com. Ask us questions. Tell us what you want to see.
Love ya.
Bye.